As most of you know, the Ministerial Advisory Group has been in action for about 10 years now. It was set up to promote, advocate, champion, and in any possible way cajole the best possible placemaking for Northern Ireland. And I guess, as we know, that's a very complex environment to be working in. There are so many voices that need to be heard and understood, issues that need to be synthesized, and knowledge that needs to be shared. And today is very much about part of that sharing of knowledge, experiences from near and from further afield.
And delighted to be with you today to take part in this symposium, which is about bringing together a range of stakeholders to discuss the importance of decision making in good design. I guess one of the great paradoxes that as a generation, and I include my children in that as well, we've taken design quite seriously in the everyday artifacts we use. The cars, the bicycles, the furniture, the electronic gadgets we have. We're fixated by design. And yet, I challenge you to stand anywhere, in any place, outside the historic core of our cities, and revolve very slowly through 360 degrees and see if you can see anything that isn't mediocre. And I think it's kind of extraordinary that we accept this. The environments we live in actually are not very good. And I think it's very interesting how difficult we find it to translate design into the physical environment and get it right. What we're really saying is that actually the world we live in is very, very complex. And as designers, as architects, planners, politicians, placemakers, actually our role is to navigate this complexity, broker agreements between the right people, and occasionally, just occasionally, when we get it right, things happen. If we work really hard, those can be quite good things. I know one of the themes today is around the importance of collaboration and the ways in which process and getting people at every level aligned to try and deliver great places. We live in a period of huge uncertainty. This is Zygmunt Bauman, a Polish sociologist, a philosopher, who talks about liquid modernity, the fact that unlike the 20th century, the period we live in, nothing stays set long enough for long-term planning. And therefore, as individuals, as practitioners, as governments, we are adapting. We have adaptive strategies in a liquid world where we're constantly adjusting rather than having the hard long-term planning strategies that we used to operate under. But increasingly, and what's also interesting, internationally, as is Shanghai, the ways in which cultures which traditionally didn't necessarily use public space in a public way are beginning to embrace it. And the idea of usable public space is now seen as one of the great litmus tests of how good civic life is in a city, and therefore how successful that city is. And then finally, one of the most intriguing things for me in the last 15 years of my career has been the extent to which design has shifted from a creative act of producing plans and designs to thinking about function and thinking about the choreography of space. And this idea of the designer who has a constant relationship with place, even after it's finished, to try and make it work and try and actually operate with communities to occupy and explore the dimensions of space. I think it's one of the great challenges now we have as designers. So I'm going to finish where I started. I'm going to finish back in Prenzlauer Berg and explain why I think this is a fantastic bit of public space. I mean, this didn't win the Stirling Prize. And I can't even tell you who designed this, by the way. But what is interesting, this is February, it's 8 o'clock in the morning and it's minus 4 degrees Celsius. And whoever designed this knew a huge amount about successful placemaking. And maybe the test of successful placemaking is that people come and sit and use your spaces at 8 o'clock in the morning when it's -4 degrees, and actually it works under extreme conditions. So, in terms of setting the tone for the morning, I think it's about how collectively we come together from different disciplines, different people who are agents and actors in the city, and how through determination and sheer cussedness we try and make really good places. It's not easy. You can't replicate it. It's not a quality manual. But when you get it right, sometimes really good things happen, and maybe our role is to make good things happen as often as possible.
So the role of the council, I think, is central to placemaking, but it can't do it on its own. It is all about partnership. It is all about collective responsibility and co-owning, if you like, the vision to create a capital city that has its own identity and is a great place to live, work and play. So working together is significant. Communities are at the heart of that process. There are key stages within our LDP. But over and above that, I think we've probably visited over 40 or 50 events in the last month or so through our preferred options paper. So we are out there, and it's important that communities help to shape that and that their voice is heard. The role of the elected member is critical. I'm sure George will say that the same thing. It's the relationship between the elected members and the communities they represent and the officers, and it's important that each and every one listens and understands their respective roles and just adds value, if you like, to that process. It's about a step change of improvement in urban design and quality, and I think the role of MAG here is important, and Andrew and I have talked about the reliance that my previous authority had on the Design Commission for Wales, and how that positive relationship certainly added value to the debate around getting good quality design. So I think that is at the core of what we're seeking to achieve as a council. We can only do so provided we've got an enforcement team which positively and proactively monitors the decisions that we make. I think it is about corporate working. It is about removing perhaps some of the silos within the council and between the council and other departments of the assembly to make sure that we put aside perhaps the traditional way of thinking.
I think the first question we all have to ask when we're designing a city, whatever we're doing, whether as architects, planners, politicians, is who owns the city. And that, to me, is really important. And I think that shows in the way public space is used. It's important to see the city as a project. As an architect, I see the city as a project. And it's successful when it comes to life. A building may win awards, but it's an absolute failure if it doesn't come to life. And, it is the people stupid must be the sign that every architect's practice has up in its kitchen to remember why we do it. It's not the photographer stupid, it is the people stupid. But it's important, I think, to look at management structures rather than just accept what went before. And the first thing I did is I said, I want an architect in the most senior position that you can put an architect in local government, apart from being chief executive. And so what we did, and I followed really heroes of mine like Jamie Lerner and Curitiba, who was an architect who became the mayor, and he put a load of architects in charge, and he just made huge change. Now, you could put a load of architects in charge, and it could be an absolute disaster. But so it is who. But I decided to get rid of a lot of the silos and to have a much broader form of management: place, people, neighbourhoods, and change, business change. Business change, obviously, to change the way we deal with our property and all that sort of thing, and to deal with our people and with the administration. And we all worked in one room. The mayor, the chief executive, the four directors and the director of place, Barry McRory, an architect, a planner, and somebody who understands about the making of place. And that was really important. We asked the question, what's local government for? Because I think local government, sometimes serves itself too much rather than serving the place enough. And it's about slow architecture, about slow planning, about accepting that you must adjust as you go along rather than just fixing things. Because if you just fix things, you lose the opportunity to create that livable activity. And so I think that has been much more successful than I would ever have dreamed of. Create the visions for people, and I think people are beginning to do that. Give yourself permission to dream, and make quite sure that it is all authentic.
I'm really impressed by the title of today's symposium, Loving Places, as I believe that encapsulates what good placemaking is really all about. There's a rich research base looking at the impact of the built environment on health. Now, traditionally this is focused on physical health, but the impact on mental health and general well-being is increasingly being recognised. So I think the lesson is that whatever the process, whatever the budgetary issues, whatever the trials and the tribulations, we need to create places that are positive and uplifting and perhaps even inspiring. So it's good to follow Bristol. So for successful placemaking, we need to hear the stories, and we need to build the narrative or stories that attract and sustain people. So I think to conclude, if we want to create places that people will love, we need to have vision. We need to make people feel good and craft a narrative around the place, and we need to create the environment and the buildings and the landscape that will sustain the momentum.
If you just scratch beneath the surface, really shallow, you find the most extraordinary, amazing human stories about the history and presence of that place that you can hoover up and collect and use as a way to go forward. But our work was about creating the kind of buildings and the kind of place and the story of that place to enable others to come there and create enterprise and create jobs. Place is community. For me, it takes a community to build a community. And that community for me is a partnership between private sector, between public sector, and the community on the ground.
When we come to a project, an awful lot of the strategy has been set. So, you know, sometimes the potential of the project has been put in place long before we've actually arrived and its potential. And on a lot of the projects that we've been on, there have been architects in key positions that have been driving it much farther back down the road. And I've always felt that from both, and maybe also for the design schools, that aspect of architecture isn't actually pushed enough, that it's not all about designing the buildings, but actually really kind of coming in on the strategy side, on the client side, and also on the construction side. So I suppose as architects, if we really want to affect things, we need to go in at a much earlier point, like at local area plans, or try to input at that point.
And we have cities where, unless you're very fortunate to have an enlightened mayor or a very, very strong head of city architecture or planning, or a politician who stands up, actually you don't have a client with a vision. And then all the other mechanisms of government conspire to make sure that you end up with something which is the lowest common denominator. And that's something which I think is probably, I'm not drawing conclusions yet, but something which MAG have a very, very key role actually in actually helping to establish really strong informed clients to force the really good design through procurement. We've had 5 different presentations. We've looked at how you structure the city and government around process and draw agendas together. We've looked at the role of enlightened city leadership from the top. When we've looked at 2 contrasting but extraordinary projects where people have actually just sat down and made stuff happen by rethinking how you do it, and resetting the agenda. Then finally, fantastic examples, proving that great architecture is possible and it is completely transformative. It's really difficult, and it's up to you and organisations like MAG to fight and fight and fight, and to keep making sure that we don't default to the lowest common denominator, and that actually it's that relationship between city leadership, between professionals, between designers, and the community, with a desire to actually do something better than the default.